You're listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast with Maggie Green, episode number 398.
Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast, a podcast that celebrates cookbook readers, buyers, collectors, writers, and clubs. And now your host, cookbook author, culinary dietitian, and cookbook writing coach, Maggie Green.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. How's everybody doing today? Hope you are all doing well. I have been working behind the scenes on a brand new cookbook publishing masterclass. More details are going to be coming out about that very soon, so stay tuned. But today's episode is sort of an in-between episode, bridging what I talked about last week with my daily rhythms and how I believe that cookbook writers need to be rooted in some rhythms in your day, cooking, writing, obviously, and then things to help you generate content and ideas for your books. Bridging that with actually publishing your book, and that is what I like to think about as the hidden cost of working on a book without really having any direction in what you're doing. So let me start with a few images so that you can kind of grasp what it is I want to talk about and help you see today. I want you to imagine that there is a water skier in the water behind a boat that's water skiing. And she is enjoying the water skiing, kind of, but she's going around in circles. And the reason she's going around in circles is because there's nobody driving the boat. The boat does not have a captain, doesn't have a driver. No one is directing the boat. Therefore, the water skier is just aimlessly going in circles in the water. It's also like maybe thinking about preheating an oven, pulling out all your ingredients to bake something, lining them up on the counter, but never deciding what you're going to bake and never putting the recipe together. So everything just sits there. The oven's preheated, the ingredients are sitting out, but you've never really decided what you're going to make. Or what if you packed your suitcase, you went to the airport, you went through security, but then you're standing at the gate, if you could do that in 2026 with no ticket because you don't know where you're going. There's a lot of energy and effort that we expend. There's even excitement about water skiing and baking and taking trips, but there's no direction. And that's exactly what happens when we start cookbook projects without really deciding on our destination. We work and we cook and we write recipes and we're showing up and we're doing what we've talked about doing on this podcast. We're taking notes, we're developing recipes, but our work isn't really going anywhere because it's not pointed anywhere yet. So what feels like we're doing something for our book actually doesn't make any progress toward what is important. And this is where so many of my people on my email list get stuck and get frustrated. And all of this comes with costs, like hidden costs that most people don't really see until they're kind of deep in the process. And that's what I want to help you to understand today, because I hear this all the time. People say, I want to write a cookbook, but I'm not sure where to start. This feels too complicated. I feel like most of what I cook is just variations of recipes I see everywhere else. I hear people say things like, I'd like to have more input maybe on the layout. I'm doing food photography. I'm styling my photos. They say things like, but how do I get it published? And there's so many cookbooks out there. Why would people even want mine? And all of these sound like different problems people are having with their cookbook writing, but it's really not different problems. It's all one thing. And what that means is that we're working on cookbooks without deciding and without knowing what we're doing is building toward. And there are real costs to not making these decisions about where we're headed with our cookbook. First of all, we spend a ton of time. It's not just that things take longer, it's that you spend time doing work that doesn't move anything toward where you want to go. When people say they don't know where to start, what's really happening is that they're starting in a lot of different places. They're working on a lot of different things, but there's not really any clear direction. So the book doesn't really fit together. Their work doesn't fit together. They end up with pages of content that don't really look like they fit in a final book. They're working on layout, but they don't really know why. There's no structure to anything that they're actually doing. And then once they actually determine the structure or they determine the direction, they have to go back and redo everything. It's like cooking 3 different meals just halfway through and finishing none of them. You're putting in a ton of time and you're making effort, but you're not accumulating anything that matters. And there's no compounding effect to the work that you're doing. So often when people say they don't have time to work on a book project, it's because there's no direction and they're spending so much time wasting time. The project feels so big that they just actually want to say they don't have time to work on it. The second thing that I see is that it does actually cost us money if we don't have a direction for our book project. When someone tells me they want help with layout or photography early on, I usually understand why they say that, because everybody likes everything to look really pretty. They think, well, if they can make it look nice, it'll help to make it clear about what I should be doing. But without a direction, it's very easy to invest in the wrong things at the wrong time for a book project. You might pay for someone to take photos before you really even know if you need photos, if you need to be the one taking the photos, or what the photos actually even need to be for the book that you're ultimately going to write. You might spend money on book design or layout before the structure of the book is even clear. You might have someone hired for editing before you actually have a version of the book that's going to be published that needs to actually be edited. None of these decisions are bad decisions in themselves. They're just premature. It's like furnishing a house before you even have the blueprint drawn to build the house. The pieces of the furniture are beautiful, but they might not actually fit in the space that you're actually building. And then later you're going to have to redo the work or absorb the cost of starting over. The third thing that happens to people when they start working on a cookbook without direction is momentum. And this is the one that most people feel the most because one of my coaches once said there's a half-life to excitement. We all start out excited about starting new projects. We all have tons of ideas. We feel highly motivated. But then generally for my students, it's about 90 days in, as they start to learn more, their confidence kind of drops and they start to think things are feeling more complicated. Or you might notice if you're working on your own that you're not opening your document as often. You might feel like you're slowing down, you're questioning the project. It starts to feel like maybe you're thinking, I'm just not disciplined enough to do this. I'm not ready to do this. But what's really happening is that your effort is not creating any traction. When you don't know where the work is leading you to, it's hard to sustain energy. It's like running and running and running and not really knowing where you're going. I want to tell you, this is not a motivation problem. It might feel like it is, but it's not. It is totally a direction problem. And over time, that starts to feel like your project is stalling, even though you are still working on it. And then the fourth thing that happens is we miss opportunities. When someone says to me, I have ideas, but I don't know how I'm going to take these ideas to someone who would want the book. That's a publishing path issue. And you have to decide before you even know if you want someone to want the book, is if a traditional publishing deal is even what you want. There are specific things that matter early if you want to do traditional publishing, like how your book is positioned, who your reader is, and how you're going to build relationships and visibility with these readers. But if you want to self-publish, there are a lot of early decisions you have to make that are not the same as if you want to traditionally publish. Like, what kind of book are you creating? How is it going to be used? And how are you going to print and distribute the book? And if you're deep in recipe writing and story writing without knowing the path, what ends up happening is you're not making the publishing decisions. Opportunities may pass you by because you have not decided on the direction of your book, and you don't put your work in front of the right people. You don't ask the right people to help you with the right things. You don't shape your idea in a way that invites a yes. And often you don't even realize that the opportunities you have missed or the money you've left on the table until much, much later. And then the fifth thing that happens is we get overwhelmed. And this is where everything that I have mentioned above starts to pile up. And people start to say things like, my bottleneck is my platform. I'm not a fan of social media. I'd like more input on layout and styling. And without a direction for our book, everything that we do feels equally important. We think that recipes matter, the platforms matter, the photos matter, the design matters, the writing matters, and it's true, they all matter, but the problem is we're trying to do this all at once. And instead of moving forward with one thing, we're pulled in multiple directions. We're just like that water skier that is water skiing around in circles. There's no direction. There's no filter to what we're doing. There's no sequence. There's no clear sense of what actually comes first based on the direction that we're headed. So when everything feels urgent, we're not actually getting anything done because we don't know what to pick that's going to make a difference. So underneath all of these things that start to happen when we don't have a direction with our books, we start to doubt our work. We start to doubt whether our cookbook will really measure up against someone else's. And the thing that I want you to see is that your book will measure up against someone else's because you bring something to the project that no one else can bring to the project, and that's yourself. Just remember that you are the differentiating factor in your book. Your life experience and what you bring to the table, so to speak, is what makes your book different. It's just because it hasn't been shaped into something and given direction yet that you are feeling this way. So here's what I want you to take from this episode. Your cookbook is not just a collection of recipes and stories. It is a specific offer to a specific group of people that either invites a publisher to say yes to you through a traditional publishing deal or invites you to create the book and bring it to life yourself through self-publishing. And these two paths ask different things of you at the very beginning, right now when you're starting your project. Not just later, but now. So instead of starting with recipes, I want you to think about a decision and put a driver in the boat so that the water skier is going in the direction and getting somewhere with a driver in the boat. This is like thinking about having our heart on a string, doing something we love, but our head is not involved in the project. And our head will lead and our heart will always follow. So what do you want with your book? Do you want a traditional publishing deal? Do you want to self-publish? Is this a legacy book for your family? Or is this a book for your community or your audience that you've already built? And I promise once you decide that, everything else begins to line up because you know what to focus on. And you know what can wait. And you know what a traditional publisher does. And you know what self-publishing is. And you know what actually is going to move the project forward. So what I wanted you to know today, more than anything else, is that the work that you're putting in on a cookbook project and the dreams that you have to write a cookbook may feel like overwhelm. It might feel like you're not getting anywhere. It might feel like you're spending tons of time and not having any accumulation of your efforts. It may feel like you're spending money, but you're not seeing any results, mainly because you have not chosen a direction for the publishing for your book. Because without this direction, you're in motion, but you're not moving forward. And with a direction and a decision, the work will start to connect and the decisions get easier and the book starts to become real. All because you've been willing to decide what direction your book is going in. So just ask yourself, have I decided what direction I'm taking the publishing for this book? And if the answer is no, then that could be why you're feeling overwhelmed or out of time or like you're spending effort, but you're not seeing any results. And once we make that decision and we know whether we're headed in the right direction, whether our boat has a driver, then we can start taking the steps toward the publishing that we have decided that we want. It makes all the difference in the world. And the thing about it is the difference between traditional publishing and self-publishing are vast and varied. There are some parts of the projects that are similar, but the way we start them is completely different. So I hope today that this helps you to see that your desire to write a book is a beautiful thing. Your desire to share your recipes and stories in a cookbook is a beautiful thing too, just like water skiing is. But we need to have someone driving the boat. You need to make a clear decision about the type of publishing you're interested in doing before you start your next steps. So if you are interested in learning more about the upcoming Cookbook Publishing Masterclass, there is a link down below in the show notes for you to get on the wait list, get on the email list, and all the further details will be coming out, and I'll talk about it more in next week's episode of the podcast. So that's it for today's episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. This is your host, Maggie Green, and until next time, have a great day and keep loving your cookbooks.
Thanks for listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast. You can find out more information at www.cookbooklove.co.